Maybe.
Because if we are, I'm ready to call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock. Yeah,
Oh,
no, I understood that.
Well,
I just.
this is weird. We're in person now.
I know, it is weird.
Everyone should already have that.
Is Equinox coming and bringing something?
What I thought they were doing.
Well, if so, what's
I just told the world I didn't bring mine. I'm so used to
Okay,
having
and,
like,
and
yeah.
are we live?
So hopefully,
Uh,
yeah, either they're here or we're.
I can log in.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order and get some of the formalities out of the way while Luke's setting that up. So the conflict of interest statement, in accordance with GS 18B201, it is the duty of every committee member to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearance of conflicts. Does any member have any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the committee today? If so, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict and refrain from any undue participation in the particular matter involved. So with that, we will call it to order, and I'll ask for an approval of the agenda.
Move for approval
Anybody?
of the agenda.
Okay, all you have to do is speak up. And then approval of the minutes of the April 13th meeting.
I approve them.
Okay. And now we'll open it to a public forum. Do we have any members of the public on Zoom?
Yes, but it's Gerald.
Pardon?
It's Gerald Equinox, so no public.
Okay, no public. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to the agenda items. I put Riverside Park first. Are they ready to present?
Yes. Happy to present.
We could just call them since it's just them.
Okay, then,
I think there's a miscommunication in the live event versus.
what we'll do is we'll go ahead to the subcommittee reports while you're, getting in touch with them.
So you guys can't hear us? Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, a little bit of feedback.
Sorry, I'm muted.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are ready to go with Equinox.
We're ready if you guys are.
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we had communication with you.
Okay, yes. Can you hear me?
Ken?
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The host has to enable that. It's saying the host disabled participant screen sharing.
I saw that too.
See if you can now.
There we go. Thank you. Okay. All right, so I believe you can, all right. I'm looking at your window to see, I can see the monitors. I can see that you're sharing it now. All right. Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everybody. Parks and Greenway Advisory Committee for welcoming Equinox to share our update for Riverside Park. This is our 60% update. Bringing it to you guys first to garner feedback before we bring it to the board. So let's go ahead and get started. First, want to say that we got comments the last time around for the 30%, and we've addressed all those comments, and hopefully you will see that through this presentation. Okay, so first things first, I just kind of wanted to share some positive moments. Riverside, we're at 60%, but Silverline Park is now open, and I'm sure you guys have been receiving a lot of feedback as we are at Equinox. I know some of the signs are still up with Equinox logo, so people are kind of reaching out to us and sharing in how they're utilizing the park. And I've been out there 3 times since the park's open, and it's been quite busy each time. And actually, 2 of those occasions, I've seen a boat trailer. So someone must have used the boat trailer to get a boat down. I'm not seeing someone unloading it, but I've seen a boat trailer down there. Just to kind of zoom out just a little bit, I wanted to share, the progress at a glance for the whole Blueway and Greenway. You can see my solid lines here are things that are currently accessible and can be used. And then the dashed lines are things that are still in progress for the Greenway and Blueway. So you can see here the Blueway effectively can be functioning for a certain group of people, because you can see up here, this solid blue circle, there is a step access there. We have a dash circle as well, because the hope is to improve that for more users to be able to use it. So zooming in specifically at Riverside Park, we are now at the 60% design. Looking ahead, we're hoping to get through 100% design by this fall. Equinox is hoping to be done in August. S2O has their modeling in Europe in August, so their 100% design will be a little bit behind ours. And then the idea is once we get our 100% design, we're moving into permitting. We've allotted quite a bit of time for permitting because this is quite a project to tackle on the permitting front. So we're looking at late spring to get our permitting in hand. And this is the timeline that still stands until unless something comes up. And with bidding and construction to follow in the summer of 2023. Initially starting with clearing when we're out of the moratorium, and then once we get out of hurricane season in the fall, we can likely go into the wave. So zooming in on the park, this is the updated rendering for 60%. This will be the last rendering that Equinox is tasked with completing. And the idea is that with 60%, the hope is that the design gets finalized, and then moving from 60 to 100%, that's where all the details get designed. So the overall layout of the park should be finalized after, comments from this committee and then from the board. That's the hope, is to get before we move on to 100%, to get the layout finalized. So I want to address, so we had feedback from this committee last time around, and I want to note the changes, the all around changes that we made, and hopefully you'll see that the changes reflect the requests from this committee. We expanded parking so that the loop goes now under the old Leicester Highway. We have extended the turnaround to accommodate food trucks being able to park and allowing larger vehicles to turn around and smaller vehicles to be able to turn around simultaneously. So now we have food trucks could park, buses could park, unloading, loading zone, basically at the edge here in the wider circle. We've included some drop-off seating locations and some bollards along this area to keep traffic from running into the plaza, but also allow for emergency vehicle access or maintenance vehicles to be able to hop onto the plaza, because it'll be a mountable curb, which is some bollards there. We have separated the changing in restrooms. The original 30%, obviously it was just a rectangle. So, moving from 30% to 60%, working with the architects. You'll see in a second kind of what that design looks like, and you might have already seen it. We've also included an outdoor shower / foot wash We have added a seating patio. So what this does is it adds additional diversity in the type of use area. So there is upper level seating, waiting for restroom users or shower users, or people just coming off the Greenway kind of wanting to not get too close to the action. So, we know from research that providing a variety of different layers of engagement improves the quality of the park. Another thing that this does is it actually allows us, by pushing this out, it allows us to get the proper steepness on the slope here for a slide. So a culvert slide, which we've included. At the 30% level, this edge was very nebulous, right? But on the 60% level, what we've done is we have grades. So we've worked out our grading, and we have a sort of stone wall here. We have some stone on this edge that S2O will be putting in. But this is designed based on the wave feature and coming around this crest. This is actually designed to deposit sediment. And that will only be covered in water in flood events, right? So the ordinary high water mark actually still sits at the edge here. And so what that will allow is bleaching of the sand. So, or the silt, so it will appear more like a beach, but it will still be mucky because it is the French Broad River. We've added some natural play at this creek access here. So, natural play was on your guys' list. And so we have some natural play here with a large climbing boulder. We have, like I mentioned, the culvert slides. And then over here, we were thinking sort of like a mud kitchen, whether that's like a carved out log from on site that the kids can use to fill with water and sand, or whether it's a concrete poured in place kind of bowl. I think we had some imagery on that. We've adopted your recommendation for a 14-foot wide greenway through the park. So that's been changed. We've added a lower pavilion because we are removing the existing pavilion to make room for other accommodations here. So now we've added this lower pavilion, which is roughly the same size as the existing pavilion, but will match the architecture of the upper pavilion and the restrooms. And we are recommending, or we've changed this step stone access to a ramp access. And I noted that this is non-motorized. All the access points to the river are non-motorized. So these will all be only accessible via, walking or biking to these locations. This ramp access is roughly, now you may have seen a previous iteration. We have, based on email comments, we've made some revisions to this, and I'll go over that later. And then we've revised the parking from the 30%. So what this allows is this loop access here allows vehicles to get down lower. So any vehicle having a trailer, let's say they have a canoe or a kayak that they want to unload, or whether it's an outfitter who is allowing their tubes to come all the way down. This could be a place for outfitters to come out, which is not suitable in any other location on the site. And then they could use these spaces, I'd say, for, you could have them timed at 30 minutes, like no more than 30 minutes for this. If you want to use it for, you can maybe allot 2 of them, or that's up to the town's discretion, how many you want as short-term parking. But we thought it would be very beneficial based on a lot of the feedback that we've got to include some sort of spot for some vehicle with a trailer. And then, of course, things that don't show up in the rendering and things that will be added in the after the 60% that are more detailed items. But I wanted to share with you that we were listening from the 30% is there is definitely signage for education purposes. We have signage here. We're going to have signage here. We'll have signage here on that abutment. There'll be signage here on the overlooking the wetland. I believe there's one over here as well. And there may be opportunity for a couple other places, but those are the ones we know for sure, and we kind of have an idea of what those things are starting to take form, you know. Lighting, there is going to be lighting embedded in the ramp stairway for mainly safety purposes. We've been kind of had a couple meetings with the town regarding how much lighting do we want on the site. And the town ultimately is looking for something that's not overbearing, but you know, provides some safety. So if someone happens to be getting out of the water at dusk, you know, they can safely make their way up the ramp and get back to their car. So we are embedding lighting along the ramp down the staircase, and those will be in the risers of the stairs. And then, of course, bike racks. We have a set of bike racks here. As we get into our details, we may consider adding another set of bike racks along the Greenway somewhere over here. But of course, that could also be a part of the Greenway project. So if, you know, thinking about funding, which portion of the larger Greenway and Blueway system do we want to add additional bike racks? But at least for the park, we have some right here. And then grills, we will add additional grills in this revised picnic area. So kind of zooming into the plans, I'm going to take this one kind of page at a time. This is straight from our 60% plan set. These are kind of some of the visuals of things you might see in this location. So what we're thinking about here in this center of the parking is sort of a bio swale, bio retention combination. So there's going to have some sort of checks along the way. So there will be some retention is planned, but it is intended to move the water as well, so that if there's additional water flowing over the check dams, it makes its way to this bioretention here. So this side will be bioretention, and this side will be a stormwater wetland feature. And we have overflow control devices to make sure that no water ever gets above our design level. You can see here a picture from New Belgium. We're thinking something similar as far as in the center of the parking lot, something with natural stone that we're using throughout the site and that we're getting a discount on. So we thought we'd use that as much as we can, along with some bunch grasses, clumping grasses, and then, you know, some stone and bioretention media. Here's an example at New Belgium as well with what these crossings could look like. That could also act as checks. So what that does is it slows the water down, allows the water to percolate, while also providing a crossing. Here we have example signage of what can occur right over here. So you can see this is sidewalk. This kind of hatch pattern is representative of concrete. So this sidewalk here has a railing right here, because what happens is the grade drops down. And so this is now 2 to 3 feet lower than this. And so you have a railing overlook, and then actually having a wall with a railing creates a nice clean edge for wetland. And we know from research that the public actually prefers having a nice clean edge on their wetlands versus, you know, a more ambiguous edge. And so having a sign about wetland function, we thought would be appropriate there. The circle here, this is kind of like signifying drop-off location. It's showing kind of our change in traffic habit. So we want to identify, first of all, we're kind of encircling where this river pattern starts. So that first sign is kind of the sign that will start that river form, and then it's just a change in material. So this river form here is kind of supposed to be an exposed aggregate, whereas this material on the outside is more of a sand wash concrete. And so you'll have a difference in material there. And this image is just kind of like an example image of something that we used as like an idea of the feeling that it's going to have, right? So you're changing from asphalt to concrete. Here it's kind of pavers, but we're changing to concrete to kind of give that changing feeling and let you know this is now becoming more of a pedestrian area. Think larger scale than this though, right? So this will be able to, at a larger scale, you know, imagine food trucks parking along this edge. And you can see there's a mountable curb here, and there's these planters. And instead of planters, we're going to have bollards. But it's a very similar type feel. And you can see there's seating over here. That's kind of similar to what this is over here, is just kind of this drop-off seating. So if there was a bus dropping off here, teachers could have their students start to sit on the bench and wait while the rest of the bus unloads. And, people could use that, it doesn't have to be just students, obviously. People eating food from a food truck could just use that seating there. Or if you are dropped off, let's say you are dropped off, like it's someone with kids or someone who has mobility issues can get dropped off while someone parks the car and then walks back. So we thought it'd be very important to kind of have seating at the drop off. Moving to,
Jason,
yes.
hold on, can you move back to that previous image? I do want
Yes.
to point out one thing. On our plans, I know we talked about a 14-foot wide greenway, but in fact, this is 12 feet wide. And the reason is you can see with the parking, we're really pinched with the Craggy Mountain Rail line. You can see a very faint line, which is kind of a fence between the greenway and the rail line and the railway right there. And then we have the parking and we have a guardrail. So we're really kind of pinched. We don't have the room to do 14 feet. So instead of taking this, and if we're going to have 14 feet anywhere, it probably should be through here in this section, because we're just a lot of activity here. So instead of taking it from 12 feet to 14 feet back down to 12, and right now Highway 251, which is the Woodfin Greenway, we're in discussions with them to try to extend it to 12 feet where they can. But there's a good section of the greenway that'll be 10 feet. So we didn't want to go 10, 12, 14, jumping all over the place. And really the reality of with the spatial limitations here, we're not going to be able to do 14 feet.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm sorry, I did mention 14 feet on that beginning slide. I forgot we weren't able to accommodate that. So
We tried. Jason
did.
tried very hard.
I did try. Was hoping to get you guys 14 feet, but it is 12 feet. Yes. There's no way to, like David said, there was no way to get it through here with all the restrictions. So we can address any comments to that after I finish going through. So this is the next slide. So this is the Grand Plaza. This is to orient you, this is the staircase, and this would be the wave feature. So what we're imagining is kind of bench features, kind of looks similar to this. It may just be all concrete, and maybe, we'll get into the details this next round, but it may be concrete with the wood slats. But we're just starting to kind of put an idea of materiality in front of you. Hopefully, maybe we can get some feedback on that. And then in the plaza itself, we're looking at integrating kind of boulder features to kind of break up the concrete mass. And then we'd have a nice clean edge and maybe some small amounts of gravel, or, we're not actually too concerned with any grasses or stuff that kind of might, wildflowers that might pop up in between here, because it kind of adds to that industrial site kind of taken over by this park feeling that there is. Over here, you can kind of see imagery of what the decomposed granite might look like, which is what we're proposing for this bump out to kind of also break up that feeling of concrete. So it's almost like the river's coming through and it's breaking up the form. So as you start with this hard concrete, you get to more boulders and more decomposed stone. And then as you get, more down here, it's more sand, right? So you have the sand beach over here. Obviously, this is going to be grass, but the idea is that it slowly moves from a hard form to a softer form as the river breaks the rock up, figuratively, of course. We have this form here is a dry creek bed. Visually, it's a dry creek bed, but functionally, it's actually our stormwater feature for this whole plaza. So all the impervious runoff is going to move and make its way into this. And this is an infiltration trench to store and allow water to percolate and be treated actually as well. There are overflow structures, and I can share, if you're interested in the stormwater plan, I can share kind of how all that water moves. Here we have the climbing terrace of boulders. So this slope here is like a 20% slope, 20 to 25% slope. So this one's 20%, this one's 25. So you get slightly variations in, like, you have a more steeper, not a more steeper, a steeper culvert for older kids, and you have a more shallow culvert for younger kids. One slide is completely open, like, so it's, imagine a culvert cut in half. So it's just like a half pipe kind of running down, and the other culvert is partially enclosed. So you get different points of interest there. We have here kind of example imagery of foot wash. So the foot wash shower goes right here. So you can see here, this is kind of the idea. We're thinking that could be either like this kind of galvanized material, or we were also considering Corten steel, but these would be steel grated bridges that pass over. You'd be able to see kind of through them almost to see the creek below. And then, you would cross to enter this area. You have your own nook, and then over here is your shower. So as far as circulation goes, people wanting to use the restroom can cross here. You have a maintenance room here. So maintenance has easy access to water. They can come off the Greenway. We made this wide enough for a little truck if it needs be, drop off equipment like a power washer. So obviously maintenance is definitely important to us. Circulation is important to us, user experience, and all those have kind of been taken into effect there, or into account. Here's an example of what I was talking about with the lights embedded into the risers. This is an example of kind of what those lights would look like. And that again runs along, they're embedded in the risers along the ramp there. And this last image is kind of an example of what that rock scramble would look like right there. This image here, if you guys can see that, I know it's kind of light and just kind of thin line work, but this is an example of what PFA has come up with as far as architecture. So you can see the strong angular forms to represent the mountains while we're up in the upper pavilion. Here you can see an example of what these wood slats would look like. So again, going to that materiality as you look at kind of the cohesiveness of all these elements, do they flow? And then here's an example of kind of the beachy area. So there would be some stone down here, and then there would be sediment deposited here, and then some stone, additional stone up top with a walkway behind. So this is kind of an example of what that could look like. And I'm going to keep moving forward, and I'll take questions at the end. Here we've got the stream crossing. So this is the next page over as we continue north. Here's kind of that mud kitchen, that mud sink idea. Here's just kind of an example. We don't have a perfect image of what that looks like yet. We'll get more details as we move forward about exactly what we're thinking, but this is kind of idea of like, you have muck and sand, and then there's some sort of a bowl or something that kids can mix water and mud to make their mud patties. We've got these kind of boulders containing the elevation on either side. So it kind of feels like its own little space that kids can play, but it's not too high that it's kind of too hidden. We don't want it to be too hidden. The parents can be able to sit up. Let's see if I can go backwards. No, it's hidden by that image, but there's kind of like a little mound that people can sit and picnic on, just kind of off the screen here. I'll talk about this in a second. This kind of came out from the email I got from some committee members as far as access, and it gave us some thought, but I'll talk about that in a second. Here's an example of what the stream crossing is going to look like. The stream is probably a little smaller than this. I think it's only about a foot across, but the idea is to have a culvert that's partially buried and to clad or have a stone cladded head wall to make it look bridge-ish, right? So it's kind of get that bridge feel without the bridge price. And then we have a lot of kind of planting ideas and minor topographical changes to increase the hydrology of this area. So we're adding some constructed wetland. I know the biggest concern with this area that we've seen on site, and obviously we've heard from many members of the community, is the sedimentation that happens. So there's a lot that kind of went into the minor changes of topography as this greenway comes through, and addition of wetland features to make sure that we are having the places that want to be dry, or that we want them to be dry, to get dry quickly, and allow the sediment to deposit in places that we're not going to be using. So there's a lot of nuances going into here that's not going to be represented by a bunch of pictures, but I will say that we are considering stormwater and flooding in this area. So this is Silverline. This is that boulder toe on Silverline, and that's kind of representing this edge right here, where the existing. So this is existing, the one with the kind of the sharp edges, because that's survey work. The smooth edges is proposed. This jaggedy edge is survey line work. So that's existing. We're proposing to tie into that existing to limit the amount of work we need to do. But the existing walk is very close to the top of bank. And so we're considering this a possible area where people might want to try to hop out. So armoring that bank and providing stepped boulder toe might be an opportunity for people to kind of bail out, while also stabilizing that bank. And then of course, providing strategic locations so that we don't get people coming up here and here and here and here. As we move to the next slide, or the next page over, you can see here, this is the lower pavilion, the large pavilion. You saw the line work for it, but the actual image of it, the visual will be very much similar to this, but at a larger scale. And that's going to go here. We got feedback from MSD that they want it even further off their sewer easement. So we're proposing rotating it here, which is a minimal change. Here, this is kind of what we were thinking with the boat ramp, but we wanted to make sure. I know there were previous iterations that didn't quite represent what we were thinking in the drawing. So I wanted to make sure we showed our imagery, but this would be precast kind of slats with a boulder toe. And I moved that back a number of feet based on comments, just so that we have a lip there. So it's not misinterpreted necessarily as a ramp all the way down to the riverbed. But the point of the ramp is to allow access for a lot of individuals who may find the stepped access tricky. And we've heard a lot of feedback on that. So the importance of the ramp access we'd like to keep to allow for less abled people to be able to easily get out, so they could float their raft to this boulder toe edge, put their feet down and be able to walk out. As you can see here, I wanted to show some other examples. There's these kind of concrete matted things that we could do. We could do this, we could do this. And here I wanted to show an example of kind of how they lay that in without having to do a cofferdam. So they can take their crane or these slats, they can kind of just use their bucket almost and lower those into place without having to drain the water. And it would just be recommended that these would be placed during low flow times. Here we have an example of the grass pave, which would be right here. So I know there's a lot of gray, there's gray here, there's gray here, there's gray here, but the difference in hatch pattern, hopefully you can see with the imagery that this is grass paved, so it's going to look like this, and this is going to look more like this or this. And then of course on this we have feedback that there may be opportunity for some funding, additional funding for pollinator meadows. So that would be in this location over to the right. All right, so digging in a little bit more detail about the Blueway component of the Blueway and Greenway. As of right now, the design has this play area, this beach access, which people can kind of get in and out, but that's more of like a play, not like a flow through zone. And we have this, which is an easy out, outfitter pickup, ADA kind of out, which is the more gentle ramp, kind of similar idea to what they have at the school down the way, but not a solid concrete pour, more precast. Now, we don't necessarily have it in our scope to design this. I threw some boulders in there to kind of just show you what it would be like. But based on some comments that we got, we looked at this more deeply, and we actually do think that this might be a good idea. And this kind of being a bailout bank stabilization boulder toe. Now, what we could do is, instead of doing that, if we don't want the additional blueway access, we could try to plant this edge heavily for bank stabilization. But we know that this is kind of around the bend a little bit. You know, do we want, and the question I want to raise now at this meeting is, do we want to get people coming off the wave, or people who accidentally, maybe they're floating on a raft, kind of like they would at a lake right here, and they accidentally get swept away a little bit? Do we want to give them an opportunity, something that they can see right away? You know, maybe if they don't understand or know that this is there. And that's it. So I'm happy to take questions and move back through the slides.
Comments?
I just have one comment. I appreciate your use of the grass pavers and trying to minimize the paved area. It's been a concern all along, how to create more green space and less asphalt. And again, I appreciate the use of those and consideration of that.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions, observations. I'll start on this slide since it's up.
Okay.
The location of the pavilion, if it were moved to the left, sort of at the base of where the walkway is between the parking lot and the path, it would seem like it would make it a lot more accessible. The current one is, you know, you can easily walk from the parking area right into the pavilion. And a lot of times people using the pavilion are going to be carrying, you know, food or stuff. And so I don't know, you've got two X's at the, well, you got a bunch of X's, but there's two X's that I'm looking at.
Right here?
Right there, yeah, right there. And it also seems like it's a little straight area. If MSD raised an issue about moving off of their right of way, then it seems like that would address that as well. It's just an observation. I can just imagine people wanting to get stuff from their cars to the pavilion. And
I absolutely hear you, Walt. And we did explore a number of options. This area currently, because we're able to take out, these X's are trees we're able to remove because they're dead. So the idea to meet permitting comments, we wanted to try to thread the needle on having our infrastructure be located in areas to minimize tree loss. And so because of what we have as far as stormwater running off here, I'll just kind of walk you through with my mouse if you can see my mouse. Parking lot stormwater runs off here, and you can see these red lines. Those are head walls for a culvert. This blue line is your wetted perimeter for stormwater feature, and then it makes its way out. There's no head wall here on this drawing because the pipe was able to, I think we have a drop box. We have a box that the water then flows down under and out. So this is used to convey water, stormwater from the parking lot. It also is capturing water through under drains coming off of the Greenway that are dumping into here. So this is actually prime location through here that we found to flow the water off the site. Could we consider moving the hydrology, moving the water pattern? We could. My concern is additional tree loss to rearrange that. And so we can have to weigh the pros and cons on that.
Jason,
Yes, Luke.
the other item to note is there's steps going off the parking lot to the left.
Yes.
And so having the pavilion plan right is closer to, it's more accessible that way.
Yeah, so the pavilion here, so the accessible route actually comes down right here. And so, the existing park is not, the slope of that path off the existing park is not accessible currently. So the idea is we're creating an accessible path here, and it comes around this way. So it is closer for accessibility purposes. Could we move it maybe right here? That would require a large retaining wall right here, because you can see those are the topo lines. So we have a drop of, 6 to 8 feet, something like that. I think it's 6 feet, but we've got a drop here, and to squeeze it in would require a large retaining wall. As you can see, to expand the parking lot, this red line here is a retaining wall.
Then we have to put a fence on top.
Yes, if
Walt.
you would have a railing, yeah.
So Walt, we really looked at the play when you guys from the 30%, when we're doing that and asked us to add a pavilion, we really looked at a lot of places, and we feel like this is the best location just based on topography, based on the stormwater, based on the fact that we're trying to reduce the tree removal, because there's two permitting entities, multiple permitting entities, and one of them is a Wildlife Resource Commission. And that's for the wave. And the folks that were looking at the wave asked us to also make sure we're protecting all the vegetation within the park area, because they're not just looking at the wave, they're looking at this whole corridor. So with all those conditions that we're looking at, this to us was the best location. I don't know if there's really a better location without having to really change some things around a good bit.
Well, I was just trying to make an observation that, people that use the pavilion frequently are, carrying stuff to get there. And it looked like that was, maybe could be more convenient for that. So other observations about the ramp area, the pictures that you provided, I thought were really attractive, potentially attractive. I like the two issues that I had with the ramp previously had to do with the cost, which was associated with the cofferdam, and scale, which had to do with the width and the overall appearance of a vast amount of concrete, which is, based on the boat ramp at Silverline, was the only way that I had to think about it until you proposed these others. So I like that. I'm still not sure how wide that is, or how wide you feel it needs to be.
That's 24 feet. So that would be 2 of these side by side. And you can see this property line here, this thick dashed line, that's the existing property line that mimics kind of the top of bank. So that's the existing, you can kind of get an idea of the width of the existing stepped access based on that. So it's pretty similar width-wise.
Well, it's the idea that it's not a solid mass of concrete that I find it more appealing. That it was going to be poured concrete, and that it was going to be, at one point it was 30 feet wide, and that it was going to entail $250,000 cofferdam, were all things that, kind of rang my bell. And so this looks a lot better.
Well, happy to hear that, because we took your comments. I knew that to be your concern, and so we had wanted to use these slats all along, but visually we weren't showing it. But I did reduce the width down to 24, like you said. It was 30 at one point.
And the reason we want it, Walt, the reason we want it big enough too, if you can imagine a lot of rafters, tubers, kayakers, all trying to get out in one place, that we need it big enough where there's not going to be a congestion problem. And so,
yeah,
and this is based on what we looked at Nantahala. We were out there too, with all the places that people were trying to get in and out of the river, that if we didn't give them a big enough space, they would just start making their own places to come in and out.
Right. So at Nantahala, for example, 40 foot was very commonplace. And then, a lot of them would say they wish they had 60 feet linear down the the bank. And the reason is because people are flowing in this direction, right? So your flow is coming this way. So your actual window to capture the ramp is much smaller than it appears, because you're not coming at it from a perpendicular angle.
As far as access from the buses or trailers that are carrying, how about some sort of a walkway? Because otherwise, aren't they just going to kill the grass walking across?
Yeah, so this,
I've got a concern about that at Silverline between the Pirate Pavilion and the Pirate Ship and the Pavilion, where people are just going to walk in a straight line. Unless there's no designated walkway there now. And it just seems to me that it's going to become a dirt track that no grass is going to be allowed to grow. Whereas
right.
if you
So we
provide
do,
them a walk here place, then in fact, that is reasonably direct, and in fact, they'll probably use it.
we definitely share your concern with Silverline. We have ideas moving forward, if we're able to do the maintenance plan. But as far as a direct path, for example, in the case of Silverline, from the pavilion to that walkway, knowing from other projects, some people will use that path. A lot of people will not use that path, because it's one of those instances where you have kind of a wide pavilion to a wide play area, and people are just going to shoot straight across, especially kids. And it's very similar in this case. So you have someone parking here, they may get out here, they may come out here. Someone parking here may come out here, they may come out here, they may come out here, they may come out here. And so you're just having a lot of traffic across here. So then how do we deal with that? Do we gravel all of this? Do we, make a generous grass pave area? We can do that. But I would imagine it would have to be pretty generous to force the person coming out here to go use it. So I'm thinking something along the lines of, 18 feet wide to accommodate and get the majority of people using it, and which we can do. I was just, we were just wanting to reduce the amount of impervious surface, obviously, and cost.
Well, I'm sympathetic to that. And frankly, with going back to Silverline, particularly since there's nothing there now, I would be happy to wait, a year and see where the natural path is, if there is one, and then address it. And I think the same thing could be done, here.
Like a future phase.
This is the point to, voice every concern that
Oh,
or
absolutely.
every observation, right? So.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, no, 100%. We definitely share your concern with Silverline, and we've actually thought about it here as well. I was just trying to give you our thoughts of why we left it off until now.
The primary use of this is probably going to be pickup, not drop off, right? 'Cause otherwise, you're going over the dam. Maybe.
Okay,
This is
so
pickup.
backing up to the first slide. I think that was the only other place that I had any thoughts. In the potential food truck, pull off area, are we going to provide electricity there? Because if not, whenever there's an event that's going to attract food trucks, they're going to have to run generators in order to, keep themselves in operation. Most of the food trucks will operate off of a 120 30 amp. Some of them could use 120 50 amp. They all have adapters. They all about a 50-foot cord is the maximum that you can, extend at that amperage. And so that's what they carry based on the information I was given. So it seems to me that if we could provide, electrical hookups for them, and it could be a single pillar that was lockable that had, 2 or most 3 outlets on it, that would seem to address it. They all have their own, everything else, water and whatever else they need on board. Power and the noise of the generators is my concern.
Thank you for bringing that up, Walt. Yes, I remember talking to you about that previously, and I also remember Luke bringing it up recently. So when talking to Luke, we made a note of it to make sure that we include that moving forward. It is currently not in the electric plan, but now is the time to include it. And so I appreciate that comment. And so I had asked Luke to see if he can give me those numbers. I do remember you telling me those numbers, like how many, because we need to relay that to our electrical engineer. So I wrote those down while you were talking, and we are happy to talk to our electrical engineer. And our thought was to have the hookup be kind of embedded in the surface. So you just kind of have a box lid that's lockable, kind of like what you were saying. And if you guys are good with that idea, instead of something vertical that sticks up, if it's kind of the box is kind of embedded into the concrete, I think that was kind of our thought about that.
Yeah, whatever is accessible. I believe that particularly with the wave, there are going to be multiple events where there are going to be
Yeah.
crowds there that would attract food trucks, and that it would be prudent to, provide for that.
I agree with you. And to go even further, there may be strategic places to have these flush electrical outlets in the plaza. Maybe even, well, we wouldn't want to put it at the lower plaza because they would have to be waterproofed, flood-proofed in some way. And that might add a lot of expense. But in the upper plaza, I know we will have electricity at the pavilion and we'll have electricity at the restroom. But I don't know, it might be of interest to have, a different aperture, maybe more common amp use, maybe embedded into the seat wall or something. Just to provide a lot of opportunity, a lot of flexibility in however this space is going to be used, because there's no way we can predict right now what kind of events and how people would love to use the space. So I think providing some electricity in some other places, if you're willing for us to kind of explore and come back to you, I'm thinking maybe one other place for electricity as well.
I'm thinking, I would say yes. And I wonder if we look at it in terms of at least having them near where you think people are the high traffic areas. Is then we can eliminate that trip hazard from extension cords running around that area.
Mm-hmm.
And almost any place where you put a 30 or a 50 amp, 120 volt, it's easy to add another 20 amp sort of conventional outlet for plugging anything else in.
Okay, so you're saying you might as well do both? You might as well add the 30 or 50 amp? Okay.
That's exactly what I was thinking. If you're running the service to the food trucks,
You just split off.
if you can, it's easy to add without adding that next level capacity.
Mhm.
You stop there, and whether that's 2 additional outlets or 4.
Yeah, cost wise, putting 50 amp service in is going to step at least the cost of the materials up
Yeah,
over 30 amp.
I was trying to confirm that wasn't 220 because
No, it's 120,
that's
and do confirm that. But as somebody that pulls an RV, and that's what these guys effectively are, is
Right.
this one. It's 120 volt, 30 or 50 amp. One more observation, and this is a little bit out of my ken, but it has to do with the plantings. You talked about planters, and that was sort of new to me. But my wife puts pots all over the place, and so I have to run irrigation all over the place. If the pots are not irrigated, the plants will die.
So, well, yeah, so this example image is not what we're using. In place of these pots, we're using bollards.
Okay,
Yeah, so those we would not have any plantings like that. And we have worked with our the engineer who's doing the plumbing on irrigation locations. So we do have locations for stand up, dropping the word right now, but basically places to plug in a hose.
Hose bib.
Yes, hose bib. We have hose bib locations strategically placed throughout the site.
and are those in the ground?
No, they'll be out of the ground. You know, the
Good.
yard hydrants?
Yeah, but you can do
So
it either
the
way.
intent there was to provide locations for future pressure washing.
Future pressure washing for irrigation, any maintenance needs that require water.
Right.
I only mention that from an aesthetic perspective, because you can do the same thing and put it in the ground so that it's not accessible to the public to come along, and you don't have to deal with locks and, you know, all that that you do with the frost.
I will, yeah, I don't know how the town thinks about this, but I will say as a private citizen, I take my water bottle to those hose bibs and fill them up when they're, especially at a park, if I'm at a park for a while, to drink out of.
We also need to look at, I think there was a reason to have them coming out of the ground for flooding and for backup prevention. So that might be something, if you guys want us to look into, we can explore with the engineers that are helping us with that. So just let us know if that's something you want us to look into.
Okay, and my final comment came from one of the committee members, and I had it on our agenda to discuss about Silverline. It applies here, and that is having dog waste stations. And currently there are none. These could take the form of either, you know, just bag disposal, bag dispersion, or, you know, waste collection. There's enough trash cans down there that I don't think that we need to have a regular dog poop container at the thing, but I'll leave that up to you all. I do think that there should be some provision to encourage dog owners that are walking their dogs to, you know, pick up after themselves. But most people seem to, but having the bags out there available
Encourages it.
encourages, yeah.
Yes,
To do it.
Mhm.
yes, we
Noticed.
very much agree.
That's on there.
Not only aesthetically, and, you know, you don't want to step in it, but for the stormwater as well. If it doesn't get picked up, it adds a lot of nitrogen to the stormwater and effectively reduces the effectiveness of our water treatment.
I have a question. I was
Yes.
under the impression, and maybe I misunderstood, that there were going to be two sets of bathrooms, one the south side and one on the north side. Is it just the south side now, or did I miss?
So there is an existing restroom
Oh, we're going to keep those?
on the north side. Yeah, it's gonna
Right.
be kept.
Okay,
The idea was cost, so to kind of
okay.
touch those up a little bit, make them look a little spiffier, but to ultimately just keep the same structure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in one of the previous presentations, it was sort of like, you know, putting some wood slats on them, or, you know, doing
Okay.
some stuff to make them match the rest of the stuff that was in there, because they're in not new condition.
That's
Right.
correct. So
Yeah,
the material construction for the bathrooms prefab concrete,
Mhm.
and they're going to cover it with these wooden slats. And so the idea is to take that, okay, great, let's clad the existing bathroom as well, so you kind of have that connectivity, you know, it looks the same.
right. Aesthetically, it looks
Right.
great.
That's currently not PFA's understanding. We had talked about it, but it's not in the cost estimates to clad those. I think it's just a painting. So if you guys want those, so we were gonna like redo the doors and then paint the structure. If you wanted it cladded like this, you would have to let us know, and then we would have to adjust the cost estimate.
And the architects, Samsel Architects, who's on our team, they came back to us and said, because this is in the floodplain and we're down lower, that you're gonna have water damage on the wood slats, where in the upper restroom that's up higher, you're not gonna have that. So they were the ones that recommended that we just paint it and just kind of clean it up a little bit and not do the wood slats in that lower restroom, because we were thinking the same thing originally.
We go wood slats down to 3 feet, you know, like don't run them all the way to the ground, just to give a similar feel.
Why not? That's what we will ask the architects. Let's do that.
Or could we do a mural,
Ooh,
you
like
know, painted
paint
with,
it like
you know,
wood
with
slats.
something that looked like something instead of just
That's a fun
painted
idea.
concrete,
I like that.
you know, add an artistic
Mhm.
element to it.
That sounds, those are all options, sounds like, and I think the painting might work. We can ask about what elevation would this need to be with the concrete before we added the wood slats. So would it look okay if would that be 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet? Where's that gonna hit? Is that gonna be okay? So we can ask all those questions and we can get back to you on that.
What do you
Yeah.
think, David, from a previous meeting, we were talking about screenings. And you mentioned like I don't know if it's laser cut steel with the pirate ship logo or the like pirate logo, you know, we were talking about the railing.
Yeah,
I mean, you could do something as industrial as that, having just a piece of solid sheet metal with that's cut out in either artistic or the town of Woodfin logo, clad it with that too. So
That's,
It's just a plain coat of paint.
How
They're
about
not very
this?
attractive right
How
now.
about you desire that it be maybe more than just paint? Can we go to the architects to come back to us what they recommend?
I think we can explore all that. And I would say if you guys, one of the options would be the mural thing. And if you went the mural thing, I wouldn't leave that up to the contractor. I would say that the town could probably seek a resident artist, maybe who's willing to donate a mural, you know. But other than that, you know, all the other options, I think we could go to the PFA to see what they would propose and kind of what those relative costs would be.
I like the idea of the local artist.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, I'm out of comments.
I like the, will you go forward one?
So to the north,
Yes. You had it labeled as something, but it's the rock wall there,
the boulder toe.
top of the slide that is sort of bank stabilization.
Yes, here.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, if we don't do that, something needs to be done. I mean, they're not only for people potentially coming out of the river, but people throw sticks to dogs there. Like, and if that would be, that could be a great place to say, this is where you throw your stick for your dog, not, you know, other random places. I think that is a multi-purpose
Right.
situation that could be really useful.
So-
Is that just below the little rapids where the fence line
That's
is? Where the copperheads were?
Yeah, where the copperheads were
Right, okay.
all those years ago.
Uh-huh.
You see the existing, the items in the river? Yeah.
Yes.
It's just below that
Okay.
large concrete
Mhm.
block.
That would be really nice there.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's good.
Uh-huh.
Especially with how that bank deteriorates.
Mhm.
So that being said, we would have to explore, you know, and I could talk to Charles based on his experience with Silverline. Could they add this in, first of all, without needing a cofferdam? Could they load it in from the bank? So I know you guys are trying to eliminate the need for a cofferdam. So if it's not an option to do that without it, this one we can, we're pretty confident. Now we have to check with permitting. It always comes down to permitting, but there's a reasonable level of confidence based on the precast that we can put this in without a cofferdam, because we're not going down to the riverbed and we're, you know, relatively close to the ordinary high water mark and all that stuff. This one, for the stone not to wash away, you usually have to key the stone in, so you have to kind of embed it, the first layer, and then stack on top of that. So would the permitting agency, and this could, Mike Smith's not, he typically likes to see a full plan before he makes any comments, so that's kind of tricky. I could try to reach out to him though. He's the state erosion control person who issues the permits. What he would say about that, like if we could get away with just a turbidity curtain. I think his issue at Silverline Park was the French Broad River is a high visibility area. He wants every sense of security that people floating down the river could look at it and be like, okay, nothing's getting into the river. But typically on stream restorations, they do this work all the time with just like a turbidity curtain, which is not as costly, not nearly as costly. So it's just kind of like some fabric that they put down into the water that, you know, they don't do it in the dry is what I'm saying. They don't have to put a dam up, pump out the water to lay it. They can lay these stones in the wet, but just have some sort of a curtain to kind of hold back some of the sediment laden water. Anyway, all that being said is we're not confident right now that we would be able to do without a cofferdam. It may be possible, it may not be. So that being said, would the committee be comfortable with a cofferdam to accomplish that goal for the bank stabilization in that kind of bailout area and, you know, opportunity?
No way. But could you explore it? You know, a low water event, and if it would be acceptable,
yeah,
I would think that they'd be thrilled to try to get something like that in there.
One thing I'll say about that is, don't look at this with that one thing in mind, because we are going to have all that equipment to de-water already on site when they're there. So if my guess is that's not going to cost $250.
No,
we're in the river doing it already. They've already rented the equipment to run down there and do that. So don't look at this from the cost estimate point of view. Look at it from, do we need this amenity or et cetera? And then once we get the plan fully done, we can always opt out of that once we get into construction. Because Eric, when you took me down when I first started, or Jason, maybe you remember, did Baker go down there and stabilize one of the entry points with a few rocks?
This one right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they didn't get in the water for that. And there's a stone step there. So to me, I'm thinking maybe it doesn't look like the huge wall at Silverline, but maybe it's a little bit more than what's there. So I think there's probably a compromise where you can, without getting in the river.
Well, that's fine. I would say that I'm all in favor of that, but my enthusiasm is tempered by the cost.
But we don't know the cost.
That's
right.
That's what I'm saying. When the cost comes through, if it's a full-blown cofferdam and costs, you know,
exactly. That's the whole reason, like when we were talking offline with Jason, like, is there a way to do this boat access without getting in the river? Because that just seems exorbitant.
And that's been done.
They came up with a great idea.
Came up with an idea, yeah.
And if it's not possible or financially feasible to do the rock, I think serious consideration about how to stabilize the bank needs to be made. Because that's a pretty big problem down there.
I haven't been there for a while, but it seems like right there, that bank just drops straight off.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Look how washed out in 04 with that big flood, and it's like deteriorated ever since. Something has to be done about it, but yeah, $250,000 makes no sense.
Luke, at one point, when you and I were talking, or maybe at the last meeting, you mentioned having, you know, stabilizing at multiple places.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that idea, because to me, it seemed like whether it was throwing sticks for dogs or somebody standing fishing, if it can be done at minimal cost, if there's a place for somebody to get down next to the water, you know, a couple of steps down, you know, a rock to sit on and a rock for your feet or something like that, natural sort of setting that also stabilized, because I know a number of those trees are being undercut. That would seem to me to be a good thing.
I mean, we could always, from a construction, we can do two things pop in my head, just like the goat pass. We could build it and see is the public really using this and continuing to come out at these various points between the 2 points we added. And then we could go back and add those later, right? Or from a cost estimate point of view, we could always put that in as a line item, like as an option. Like, give us a price per linear foot of bank stabilization. And then once we get to the end and we've got funding in place, maybe there's an opportunity to, all right, we've got enough funds to pay for 2 of these and there's 4, something like that. I don't know, just
Well, either way, for doing something that's going to require large equipment, while it's there, there's a certain advantage to getting it done without, going in and tearing something up, tearing paths up or whatever. For doing it later, then it gets put in the right place based on usage. I'm good either way. I'm just suggesting that conceptually, I like the idea of stabilizing those points and doing it in a natural way that also provides close access to the water.
And we found that this is a good place for that because the path already comes really close. So, and it's an area that needs stabilization. So it's good access and it's good for stabilization. But I think we have our marching orders. I think we are going to research and talk with the engineers at the options for stabilization. I know that there's more than just boulders that we can explore as far as hard stabilization. Now there is soft stabilization with live stakes and whatnot, but I don't know how sheer that edge is off the top of my head. But there are other options. And so could we do something similar to like down here where there's like a concrete matting? I think that's what, this thing right here this is actually for stabilization. That's right. Those edges are too deep for that to be like a ramp. They're actually putting this in for stabilization of that edge so it doesn't get washed away. Now that's not necessarily ideal for people climbing in and out, but maybe, we can find a solution is what I'm saying. I think we have our orders to move forward and try to explore something that will not break the bank, but also provide that access.
And you're just one last on this. It's really, there's 5 or 6 locations between those 2 circles that we're kind of talking about as well, right?
Yeah, and the fact that the path is close to the river there doesn't matter because people routinely walk across, to get close to the river. They're walking across I can see it as stabilizing it in order to keep the path from being washed away. But I think, there's any number of places where, if memory serves, trees are being undercut already.
Right. And what I would recommend in those locations, I mean, we could explore additional hard stabilization there too, but we may also want to explore plantings for stabilization. Because we want to, like Walt, you were alluding to earlier, provide a path. We want to provide specific access points so that people don't trample along the whole edge, right? We want to provide a number, 1, 2, 3, whether it's 3 or 4. We want specific ones that people can focus in on that are hard and stable and try to let heavy vegetation grow in and naturally stabilize other parts of the bank.
Well, I think, for what Luke was referring to, my thought was, it's just, let a couple rocks fall off the truck and they're 4 or 5 feet wide and it's not, a major, takeout point or so.
But I do like what Jason was saying, because if you soft stabilize those, keep in mind the elevation from top of bank to river is like 3-4 foot.
Right.
So if you stabilize it and make it not look appealing to try to scramble over,
Then they won't.
Is there going to be signage indicating to people take out just around the bend or? have we thought about?
Or like
Indicate-
river facing
and-
signage.
yeah, like when you're on
You
the
can get too
water.
Many signs, you know,
Right,
But these are
but-
the people on the river.
on the river,
saying,
like,
This is the official takeout or official.
yeah,
takeout.
just wondering how, like, it's up to them to educate themselves on the put in, take out.
do it now,
Yeah,
in all the other places.
right.
And when they're on the river, they'll be able to look and see like, oh, there's a good place to get out.
Mhm.
And, you know, especially like what Jason was saying, there is a grant that the town also has for revegetation that we have to build up some of these areas as well. And so we're gonna have these openings that will not have as much vegetation. So hopefully that's where they want to go.
Right.
Doesn't mean that they're all going to go there, but at least we're providing those clear cues for them to get out of the river.
Right.
Mark Hunt's video about all the takeout places
Mhm.
along the river was incredibly informative to me.
Oh, totally.
And we're providing
Uh-huh.
really nice takeouts where all the other places, except for one, are not
No,
much.
I totally agree. It's up to the individual to be aware, but I know, like, if I'm a tourist and I haven't done my homework, and I don't take out there, then I'm getting close to the dam, which gets dangerous, but there is one, I think there's one sign downriver in the river park that says dam below.
True, but I mean, you have.
So-
I really want to go over the dam, because
Yeah.
it turns into a lake, right? So the water flow really slows down. But I'm.
Exactly.
I didn't quite hear that, but I don't want to repeat the comment.
The water flow slows down because the dam
Oh,
is creating
yes.
a lake effect. And you also have that one other takeout at the French Broad River Academy Boys Campus. So you have that like last
That one.
place. And then it gets really,
And
the bank all along that section is really easy just to get out if you need to.
Mhm.
Right, and
Below
I will
that.
say that S2L has talked about, and they thought it was a good idea, and I concur to have. I think there should be at least one sign, and that sign is gonna be at the island between the wave and the bypass feature. And so that sign could say bypass this way, you know, and then, you know, when they get to that side of the river, if they're on the bypass, so if they're the people concerned about, you know, the turbidity, from that angle, you will be able to see both of these takeouts. And so it's just up to you to paddle your way over to the takeouts.
Jason, maybe we get them to put a sign that says take out this way as opposed like, here's your bypass. And if you want to get out of the river, here's where you can start heading this direction to get out.
Yeah, and adding to that, I know there are a lot of blue ways where the municipality puts out for tourists or locals just a map, right? So it's like, here are all the blue way points, right? Here are all the entries to the entries and exits to the river. So, you know, and they might have a short little description of what they are, and, you know, so that anyone who's using it for a different purpose knows which one to go put in and which one to take out and all that stuff.
And maybe there's a map that we could tie into something at the plaza area where everyone's going to access the site. So for the people getting in the river here, at least, that they know the takeout points before they get in the river, that there's two below them beyond the wave structure itself.
I think we could put that same map on the kiosk at Silverline. So if they put
Yeah.
in there, yeah.
Yeah.
And ideally, most people have already run their shuttle, so they know where their car's at. And
Yeah.
they'll be on the lookout.
But we can always add signs later too, if we need to.
Sure.
At the end of after the 30% design, you all requested that the committee make recommendations to the board. Is that how you would like to handle it at this point?
Yes, please. So a lot of the things you've been bringing up today, if we can get that in writing, everything from the electrical to any other things that you guys want to make sure that we address. So if you decide you want us to look at a different pavilion location, the takeout recommendation that we've added to the plans, anything that you want to make sure gets addressed, the existing bathroom and options for treating the exterior of that, please put that down in writing and whatever recommendations you want to make, because we're actually going to the commissioners next week. I believe it's, is it the 17th? It's the 17th. So Yeah, because just like the 30%, that was when we were setting our design. Once we got approval for 30%, we knew we had our design set. And now with 60%, we want to go back to you and the commissioners, because if there's any changes that need to be made, this is the incremental time to do it. And then because once we get the approval from this, it's full construction documents. And so there's a lot of detail in what we presented already, but it even gets to the next level of how is the contractor going to be able to build this.
Right,
And
nuts and bolts.
Yep, and going backwards is going to be expensive for everybody. So yes, please make your recommendations, whatever they may be.
I, for one, have not been making notes. Has recording? Okay, so we can pull all those comments off. Okay, so
In the video we posted, once it gets uploaded, we post it tomorrow.
okay, so we can get that information. That fine. Is there any other point at which we solicit public input?
So at this point, the input process is we've been putting a video together, and the video is going to share an update on the project. So if you got input at this point, it's pretty much too late. Like we can't do anything with that input. We're doing redesign and you're going backwards. So all the input from the public about what they want to see should be, that time has come and gone.
Okay.
But if you need us to hit pause and go back to that, you can tell us, and that's your decision. But we're doing informational video that's going to talk about the wave, that's going to share where we are. It's going to have more info. There's going to be a video just for the wave itself as well when S2O goes overseas and does the model. And so that video is going to be ready pretty shortly for you all to host on your website. So it's really about building knowledge about what's happening and the progress, and sharing the design based on the 30%. Because again, there was public input to get to that 30%. We haven't really changed anything. We're just getting into the details between the 30 and the 60%. And so that's something worth knowing.
Okay, no, right. And what I was getting at was, from our perspective, what we've done before is, look for opportunities to drive, the public to it. This is going to be for a presentation and not, request for information.
Right.
So, what sort of timeline? You said shortly, what sort of timeline should we look at?
So we were saying after the 60% design, we're going to have get that video ready. So I would say the video is 90 to 95% complete. So I would give us 2 to 4 weeks to wrap it up. I think we submitted a draft to Luke and Eric just to make sure we're on the right path. And I've seen the 90-95%, and I think it looks pretty darn good. So we're pretty close to being able to get that to you all.
Okay, I think in terms of maintaining, public enthusiasm, there would be an advantage to, doing the wave later anyway. That we say, come look at this, and then a couple months later say, come look at this.
For a minute there, I thought you were talking construction.
No. No, you said that there was going to be a video about the wave,
Yes.
right? About that process. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Does, to maintain and build enthusiasm. Does anyone else have any comments, observations, thoughts?
Looks good.
We'll have the recommendations ready for you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank
Appreciate
you
it,
all.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.
Okay, that was good. Moving on, subcommittee reports, communications and marketing.
Sure. Ours is quite brief. We spent quite a bit of time throughout late March and April supporting the ribbon cutting ceremony. So we met weekly with Eric and Ryan, and Luke was on some of those calls, just going over logistics, some of the highlights. I know, thank you, Chris, you were able to offer that schematic on planning and flow, which I think the town really took to heart and used extensively. So that was great. Thank you for sharing that. Anne worked quite a bit with Woodfin Elementary, and they really encouraged their families to get involved. And I think that was just a tremendous success, and the turnout throughout the community was incredible. I think they did a robocall, and then you had event flyers that you
Yeah,
produced.
there
and-
were digital flyers and paper flyers that went home to families, and a phone call, and seemed like there was something else, but
Yeah, it worked out really
it
well.
did, it did. There were a lot of families there.
Lot of families. And then we helped with the publicity. So we worked on press release and then did another round of outreach to the media. And in the notes, you can see a smattering of some of the coverage. It's not all inclusive, but it's what I could pull off from Google. I don't know if you have Google Alerts set up to capture all those, so that's great. But the Mountain Express covered it. The Citizen Times did a really nice piece for us, which was great. WLOS they weren't able to come out, at least I didn't see them when I was there, but they did a follow-up piece, which was great. Clint over at Weaverville Tribune did a piece. So, and then there was a little bit of action like on ABL today. There was a great social media post on Facebook and maybe it was their Instagram, and it had upwards of 900 likes. There were a ton of comments. The engagement was really great. So it was a really positive month from a high profile standpoint, and kudos to Woodfin and to Eric and the entire team. I mean, the event was really, in my mind, was really successful. You all did a great job, and the community really showed up. So that's all I have. Anything else?
Any questions? I agree. Great job by everybody. Okay, the project management. I believe Gerald, you're gonna do that.
Yes, and we met yesterday and talked about where to go now that Silverline Park is completed, and it looks like we've got based on the presentation by Equinox, we've got another project to manage. But what we want to do is continue the focus on that, engage with operational planning efforts with the town of Woodfin staff and our consultant taking the lead on that, but be part of that process of coming up with an operation plan for all the parks and recreational facilities in the town. We want to pay attention to the Beaver Dam Greenway planning effort and make sure that moves along and is stays on track and on our minds. Look for opportunities to improve the pedestrian and bicycle, or create pedestrian and bicycle access across 240 at the Elk Mountain Road interchange, and continue that access all the way to the intersection with the traffic signal there on I think it's Elkmont Road, so that people on the east side of the interstate can get over to the sidewalk and access all the way down to the river. We recommend that engage with the consultant for comprehensive operational planning for all parks and greenways, and considering the new parks and greenways online in addition to the existing parks, and the project management subcommittee can serve as a resource and steering committee for that process. We'd also like to see a budget report from the town of Woodfin to ensure a continuing and recurring fund for planning efforts regarding greenways and parks. And we would also like to see a review from the town of Woodfin on the comprehensive plan and how the parks and greenways have been considered on that. So, and some things we learned yesterday, and want to make sure this is correct, that the operational plan for Silverline Park has been funded, that there's a Parks and Recreation staff person budgeted for the next fiscal year, and we want to keep the subcommittee reports as a standard agenda item to make sure we stay on track and communicate what's going on to the rest of the committee.
Thank you.
And that's it. That's it.
Thank you. I also updated what was sent to me to the Teams folders. If you will send something, then I'll.
Oh, it's up there. I put
You
it
already
last
put-
week.
You posted, okay. Any other questions?
It's not a question, it's just a comment, and that is, when we were in the subcommittee yesterday, we were talking about the federal funding that's coming down the pipes, that there's some that are really high dollar and might be appropriate for that connection over the bridge. And it came out, there was an announcement that came out yesterday from the Federal Department of Transportation. And there's a new grant program called Reconnecting Communities Pilot Discretionary Grant Program. And it is going to open up this summer. It's part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it will provide up to $1 billion over the next 5 years. The program's funds can support planning, capital construction, and technical assistance to equitably and safely restore community connectivity through removal, retrofit, mitigation, or replacement of eligible transportation facilities that create barriers to mobility, access, or economic development.
Sounds like us.
I would say Woodfin was divided in the 70s with the I-26, and that this would be a remediation to connect the east side of Woodfin to the main part of Woodfin. And we should look into it.
How do you consider that? How should that be viewed in conjunction with the widening, future widening of 26? And is that going to conflict with that, do you think, in the view of whoever's going to be awarding these grants? What's your opinion?
I don't think it would conflict with it. I also don't know the timeline of the I-26 extension. It might have been pushed way out. So this might be a good substitute. I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? That's great, fine. Okay. We have 2 committee members whose terms expire effective June 30th. Ann and Brian. Ann, you previously told me that you would be willing to serve another term. And Brian yesterday confirmed that if asked, he would be happy to serve. I'm not sure how we proceed with that. We were sworn in by the town previously. I would presume that you would have to be sworn in again, but I'll defer to anybody that knows.
The recommendation, I guess, Luke or I would make the recommendation to the board to reappoint these 2 members, and the board would make the final decision of whether to reappoint them.
Okay. Could that be done at this meeting, or would it be done at the June meeting?
Either, when is there, do you know when in June, or just?
June 30th is
So either, it could be done either meeting, because it's all before their terms expire.
I would say presented at this meeting for them to be sworn in at the June meeting, or, at their convenience.
Well, they'll get sworn in at your meeting, not their meeting.
Okay.
So they'll get, once they get reappointed, then whenever y'all meet next as a body, then that's when you'll get sworn in and all that fun stuff.
They have to be sworn in again.
All appointed, but we learned that yes, all appointed boards and committees, as you're an extension of the commissioners, are supposed to be sworn in and taken over.
Okay, I'm in all likelihood not going to be at the next meeting. I just want to make sure that that happens in June. So whoever's plates that's going to fall on,
Okay.
we'll just make sure it happens.
Yeah, I say we'll put it on the next, that way y'all can be sworn in at your meeting in June before your term expires.
Okay. Next item, the discussion of naming the Greenway through our portion of the Greenway. Would you like to lead that off?
Sure. So this greenway is a completely seamless continuation of a riverfront greenway that is connected to Asheville. And we recently named the greenway the Wilma Dykeman Greenway. So it would be great if the town of Woodfin would like to continue the name, the Wilma Dykeman Greenway.
Because I know we had discussed this, is what we call it, like the Woodfin extension or something, just so if like people are saying like meet me at the Wilma Dykeman Greenway, they know, because I mean, that will essentially be what, like a 10 or like 8 mile greenway once
Right.
you're connected.
I mean, I guess it would be like meet me at the parking lot at
or something like that.
Riverline or whatever. And also another thing that the city of Asheville needs to do is mile markers on our greenway. So it will be color coded, and our trailhead signs could have Asheville or Woodfin. That's kind of a minor but easily remedied detail, I believe.
Comments?
I kind of need to let that one sink in, I think. I don't know. Not sure how I feel.
I can tell you how I feel is one of my pet peeves is where streets change name for no apparent reason. And, you know, it becomes one thing and then it becomes another, but it's the same. And that happens all over the place around here. So I'm in favor of, you know, a consistent name. And if, you know, if it were an extension, because this eventually, I mean, am I not correct that eventually the Greenway is going to go all the way up towards Black Mountain through Swananoa and way beyond us? I mean, yeah, so in a sense, what we would be, whatever we do now is going to be if not establishing a precedence, at least establishing, you know, an indication of what other towns are likely to do.
Has Riverlink weighed in on this? Is that,
Oh, Wilma-
they
would
want
love it.
that? Yeah,
They
okay.
were the
That's what I
ones that
figured.
created the Wilma
Right.
Dykeman Riverway plan.
Right,
Wilma Dykeman was a huge,
huge.
yeah, she was a huge environmentalist. She was very strong. in
Keeper of the French
civil
Broad.
rights. She
Mhm.
wrote the book before
Mhm.
anybody else was writing about rivers.
Totally.
So she's a powerhouse and then it lived in Asheville
Mhm.
area, Beaver Dam, actually. So before it was Asheville.
Well, this is clearly something that if we had consensus, it would go to, as a recommendation to the board for the board to act on.
Why wouldn't we do it? Is there any?
I mean, currently, I think it's just called the Highway 105 Greenway Project, right?
251.
251.
That's sexy. I wouldn't argue with that.
So we'll definitely need to be bringing a recommendation, I think, to the board so that it's not called, I mean, because it's the highway, it's federal highway money that's helping fund some of it. So they're just calling it basically like, you know, based on what the transportation thing is. But I agree. I think this is a big decision that requires some thinking and some discussion with it. Because it will be the identity of a really big amenity that goes through our town limits as well. So
If we chose to call it the French Broad River Greenway, the city of Asheville has a French Broad River Greenway that's on the west side of the river. So that would be a little confusing just because they aren't a continual line like this would be with the Wilma Dykeman.
Okay, given a couple of, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, Wilma Dykeman's has her own greenway section, and I think it's important that, you know, Asheville and Woodfin's greenways do need to meet, and they do need to be a continuous thing. But in my eyes, and that this is just from my opinion, I think that, you know, who started the real fight for the greenway in Woodfin was my father. So that's where my vote would be.
And does Woodfin have an official naming policy for buildings, facilities, public parks and stuff like that?
Yes.
Well, I guess, yeah, because we've got,
You can come from this body for that. The way that it's written is generally for funding or something in lieu of funding. So effort, sweat equity is typically how that's how that policy is written. You can back and revisit that too to see how that either contradicts or supports what the recommendation would come from this committee.
I could get behind that, calling it the Jason Young Greenway too. I have no problem with that. I did understand that the pirate ship was named after him. But yeah, I'm not against that.
Well, given that we're not unanimous on it, how about we, give it another month, carry it onto the next agenda, discuss it again. And I mean, there's no urgency about doing this. And
It'll be a while before. I mean, there is a section that we can walk on right now, but it's about the link to a football field.
But we will carry it forward until we, have a unanimous, or reach consensus on it. Luke asked you to make a presentation about the trail systems. And I didn't follow that, and you didn't respond, and I didn't follow that
I
up.
don't even remember. seeing
It was in an email.
Okay,
and-
sorry. I
And
missed
so I put it on here,
it. Okay.
and his was if you felt like it. So
What trails?
Does this fill in the gap?
he's
The one that you did was it Monday night?
Thursday night.
Thursday, I can't remember the date. Sorry.
For the trails, for the,
Asheville unpaved,
yes.
the natural surface trails.
Maybe something you would do is next time, it's fine, yes, it slides, it'd be really important to know like the status, I think is what Luke was having, right?
I learned a lot from how you presented what Asheville's doing demographically, with demographics using that data to help fund certain or.
Shall we
I've
carry
been giving a
that?
lot of presentations, so I've got to find out where I was on
One-
Thursday. Sierra
Shall we
Club.
carry
Okay.
that? Do we want to carry that if it slides and things like that? Do we want to carry it to next month? Because, I didn't want to surprise you, but
Okay.
we had a deadline for the agenda and this came
Sorry, I
in.
didn't see it.
Okay.
You can even point us to the next time you're gonna do a presentation and everyone can choose.
I don't mind doing it at all. What the presentation I gave to the Sierra Club talked mostly about the Greenway master plan that the city of Asheville is about to hopefully adopt in July. And it's part of a larger plan called Close the Gap. G is Greenway, A is ADA transition, and P is pedestrian plan. So it touched very lightly on the entire massive plan and then talked about Asheville Unpaved, which is work that the city's doing with an alliance of nonprofits on some natural surface destinations in Asheville. But
Okay, I wrote a couple of those keywords down. I'll-
jargon. Yeah.
They'll be included on the agenda and cover them
And I'll
for
be
next month
leading the
and
meeting.
and
Okay.
you'll cover them however you want.
Okay.
Okay. We've already talked about the dog waste, which is something that Uta brought to my attention. So I think we can, and I think that was heard by Equinox. Future meetings, in person, Zoom, or hybrid. I personally like these in-person meetings, but I also like the idea of having Zoom as an option for the public or for anybody that can't attend. In order to change our regular meeting status, I've been advised on my expert counsel that we need to have a vote on this. And so first off, what would be your thoughts about doing in-person or hybrid? The things I just mentioned.
I'm personally in the hybrid category at this part. I really like being in person, but I also like the accessibility of other people being able to join, especially as summer is coming through. And if COVID numbers go crazy again or something like they did at the end of last summer, having that as something that people expect. I will probably be in person at all of them, but I also like having that option for folks.
What he said, I think hybrid is going to be the way of the future. I prefer to be here in person too.
Okay.
Yeah, hybrid for me.
All right. Then I would like a vote that
You're amending your meeting schedule to include in-person and online meeting.
what he said. However, the wording needs to be stated for the motion. We are voting now on having hybrid meetings on the go forward, using hopefully the permanent Zoom link that we've got and meeting here. And if there were to be a change of venue to meet someplace else, like we did at the park or something like that, that would have to be a special, we'd have to call a special meeting.
That makes sense.
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, Gerald. Okay.
Gerald, when you say aye, can you, we have to do a roll call vote since it's hybrid. It's one thing about hybrid, I forgot, because Gerald's not in person. So the chairperson, you'll need to call each person and they'll need to say their name and what their vote is.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm sorry for that.
Aye.
Lucy Crown, I.
And Call Ryder, aye.
Coral Darby, aye.
Kennedy Young, aye.
The
Gerald
ayes
Green,
have it.
aye.
Yeah, do you want
Huh?
to share?
Yeah, do I vote?
Yes, you're voting chair.
Walt Brewer, aye. Okay, have we covered that
Yes, you're
in
good.
spades? Thank you. Okay, Chris, update on pickleball?
Sure. I'll try to be a little quick because I know that other presentation took a really big part of our meeting. Thanks, Walt, for presenting to the board at the commissioners at the last meeting they had. We had a lot of enthusiasm from our elected officials to do a pickleball pop-up pilot program to install up to 2 courts at the community center basketball area and 2 at Janina Manny. I think that all of y'all have seen the renditions or the renderings that Walt has put out there. We have ordered some ultra adhesive, semi-permanent reflective asphalt tape. It arrived earlier this week, so we're ready to go ahead and install it. I did reach out to other Parks and Rec via the National Recreation Park Association on the discussion boards to see if anybody else has done a pilot program like this. Not surprisingly, a lot of that, like this is doing it on a pavement surface, like in a parking lot, the way that or on a basketball court, the way we're talking about it is not how most of them have ended up doing it. Most of them end up double striping or putting or just getting rid of tennis courts and putting pickleball courts in, which creates a lot of conflict with user groups, which also lining basketball courts. Our basketball court is set up a little bit different the way the fence is, but just putting it over the top of it can create some stuff with that. So I did have some questions to go through with some of y'all as we move forward. So the first thing I had was, does this need to be, so the way it was presented was that community volunteers would install it, but I didn't know if having the Department of Environmental Maintenance installing it would make it more of something like that someone wouldn't want to take out, you know, like if the town did it, that people might view it as something that's more of like something that's endorsed by the town, or if it's okay for volunteers to go forward with it. So,
Okay, I put it forward as
Yeah.
a volunteer effort, primarily from both a cost perspective and the fact that my sense was that pickleball enthusiasts would be, you know, would be real careful about and get it right, you know, get the dimensions right and square it up and all of that. My personal sense is that once the lines are down, nobody is going to really give any thought to, you know, where it came from, and the fact that it's on town property is going to be a testament to the fact that the town is supportive of doing it.
that was my thinking as well. Just wanted to-
You're wearing a Parks and Rec t-shirt when you do it.
All right, and then this is just a logistic thing, but in terms of for Geneva Manny, we'll need to install something like snow fencing or something, and they do have that in green, like natural colors and stuff, and so I can work with y'all in terms of whatever the cost of that might be. We've got fencing in some areas and not in others. And then I had leave asphalt, and this might be something that we'd have to go towards before the commissioners as well, to leave as asphalt, to leave it as blacktop asphalt versus painting blue, green, or with them parks and recreation colors, like with pavement paint.
Okay, I looked into some of that, because a lot of the pickleball courts are, each different, part of the court is done in a different color. There are also, none of the courts are absolutely pristine. But in talking to a couple of players, they told me that if the lines were there, they'd figured out, then they would work around, minor inconsistencies. And that also pickleball players tended to be very forgiving. If the ball from one court went into another, hold it, guys, you get the ball. And so, so that there wouldn't be that sort of conflict. So my sense was that we do these temporary lines that were what, $25 a piece or something like that. And if there is a lot of enthusiasm, and if we have metered that enthusiasm through the app that Luke suggested or some other way, then next year or at some point in the future, we can then go back to the town and say, well, look, there's a lot of people enjoying this. How about we put some money into it and do it right? And that might mean a partial, a thin top coating, or it might, I'm not sure what it means, but it would mean more money.
Yes.
And so with that in mind, that's why it's a pilot program.
Yes, definitely. If we're gonna go with permanent, the surfacing is a little bit easier on like the knees and the feet and stuff like that. So leave it as blacktop. In regards to signages, or having like a just a regular yard sign like we see for political candidates versus metal sign versus something more substantial, I will bring that to the next meeting because I'll bring some examples of that. The one example I got from a pilot program looked really, really ugly. So I'm thinking something really simple, and it's just sort of like, go here for more information or something like that. So we'll work on getting these installed first, and then at the next meeting, sort of bring some examples of what that might look like to put there to let people know about it. And then bringing your own net is pretty standard. In Asheville, all of our pickleball courts are just double-lined tennis courts, and so people have to bring their own. But I didn't know if we wanted, in terms of trying to get as many people exposed to it as possible, to have equipment available for rent or checkout from like Town Hall, YMCA, or nearby businesses, or like the North Asheville Library. And that would be another cost though that would need to go through. So that would be something to go to the commissioners, but it was just something to put out there.
It's in addition to a cost, it's a maintenance thing. It's somebody keeping track of. That's why, at least in all the conversations that I had, I said, I was told, as you just said, they'll bring it. And
yeah, I mean, for the majority of the people who are already playing, they have it, just in terms of like, if we wanted to have any sort of, and this could be something that the pickleball community could do themselves, if we wanted to have days where they taught like people who want to learn how to do it, whether that's, like this is the time that like older adults can come, or times that kids can come and stuff like that. And that's something that we could definitely work with them. I mean, at this point, I think, what we got the blessing from the commissioners was to install the tape.
In the back to the signage in the notes that are on the Teams page, somewhere in there, one of the fellows that I talked to said to post the locations on a website called Places to Play, as I recall. Places to Play. And he said that's what people used in order to find a location.
Absolutely. And but in terms of not just trying to pull people who might not live in Woodfin, like from Asheville, who are looking for more courts to play, really making this something that people in Woodfin are using, and we're getting we're taking the temperature of like, if they're being used all the time, that it's something that we as taxpayers should be paying for people who live here to do. That's where I was thinking, having either just a really simple yard sign. There's fencing in both of these locations. So if we did something that was a little bit more semi-permanent, it could be attached to that. And it's sort of like, don't know about pickleball, go to woodfinnc.gov/pickleball or something like that to find out. And just sort of like, if people are waiting, limit your time to this or something like that. And keeping it really simple with it.
What the board approved was an expenditure up to $200. about $200. We're $100 roughly
Yeah,
into
well,
that. So
and these, but these are questions if we want to make it, if we're, trying to make it successful or just, really see what it is. These might be things that they would be willing to say, like we up it or something like that. If we're just going with just the yards on it's in the ground or whatever, that's definitely going to be underneath what this is. And that's something we can start with. And if we see that they're getting used really well, or the signs are disappearing or something like that, then we can discuss maybe attaching them to something. I just know at Parks in Asheville how things disappear. So.
And Luke, you held up paper like you've got the information on the.
Oh, no, this is what I was saying, the app that I have funded is this piece of paper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then the other stuff is more communications based. Once it's installed, then press release, social media. I don't think that this would be a special event type thing, but then again, pickleball community wants to hold any sort of special events or something like that, where they're saying like, come learn how to play pickleball every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock or something like that. Then that's something that we could work on and encourage or discourage, whatever we want to do. So that's sort of where it is. I would guess it's not going to take us more than the next couple of weeks to get stuff installed. So I will keep you up to date and give you all another update. And you live over by.
I do that, and I'm sorry I had to miss last meeting, but there is a drainage problem on that parking lot.
Mhm.
And whenever there is maybe more than 4 hours of rain at a time, the lower third is flooded. So I think maybe that one court on the high side might be the way to go for starters.
Yeah, and we have enough tape, I think, to do up to 4 courts at this point.
Okay.
So we could test out some stuff, but definitely, I've gone out there when it's been flooded, and then also on that one end where the gate is that you go into the playground. I don't think it would be much of a problem in terms of like people stopping play for people to go in there and stuff like that. If that was the side it was on, because there's pros and cons to both of them in terms of like where you drive in. On that right side, you'd be driving over one court if they were both there, but we could, think about maybe doing them both on the upper side.
Like turn this way.
Or something. I think that there's some different configurations that we could look at. And I'd be happy to like walk it with you,
Yeah.
since you have probably a lot more knowledge. Because to me, when I look at that playground and I see like this much space between like the mulch and the bottom of those dragons and stuff like that, and like that's so dangerous. But also I know that there's probably a problem with the mulch washing away.
Well, I took a picture of the drainage.
Oh, good. Yeah, I
There-
did too. I just
there's-
haven't sent it to you.
There's also that manhole cover.
Yeah, on that low side,
Is
yeah.
on that low side. So the whole figuring out, which is best is.
Yeah, and I've talked to people who I play pickleball occasionally, but the people who are like super into it and are playing it several times a week and stuff like that, I've talked to them and I think they will probably have better guidance in terms of how that might go and stuff like that too. But the nice thing is that both these locations are relatively flat. And again, they're not professional grade or anything like that, but they're allowing people to get outside with the sport that is growing very, very quickly in popularity, which is why it's creating user group conflict at all over the place, including in Asheville. So we're redoing the courts at Weaver Park and not double lining them because the neighborhood specifically requested that they did not want pickleball people in their neighborhood. So-
Wow. Well, thanks. This is great.
Yeah, really
This is
good. Thank
great
you.
work. Thank you.
It's exciting.
Any other,
Well, it's the intersection of Norwood Park, Jackson Park, 5 Points, and Henrietta Spears. So it's like what Weaver Park is right there in the middle. I think it was more like the tennis community, not necessarily people who live there, but I didn't do the engagement on that. So.
any questions? Any other comments?
I signed up to play pickleball for the first time. I've never played it. I don't even know what I'm getting myself into. I just have heard it's a lot.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I think it's fun. It goes very fast. I enjoy tennis as well. And most people I think who play pickleball have a history of playing tennis as well. And the reason that so many tennis courts were getting converted to pickleball is because people weren't playing on public courts as much. They were joining private clubs. And then when COVID hit, they started really doing that again. And so now there's a little bit of a conflict. But what I've noticed is, you might have like 30 people playing pickleball at Montford Park and they're waiting on a tennis court or whatever, but you go to like Kenilworth or Malvern Hills and there's nobody. So it's just a little bit of, running some reconnaissance or
Reconnaissance.
that's it. And yeah, they seem to be available. So
One of the comments that I read was that whereas with tennis, you need lessons and a long time to learn the game.
Mhm.
With pickleball, 30 minutes and you're ready to go.
More my style.
yeah, 30 minutes might even be like a little long for you. I think you'll figure it out a little bit quicker.
Okay, we'll hear more next month.
Thank you.
Okay, project updates, Luke.
All right. So, why in the world? I'll get it up in just a minute. So most of the things have already been said by others, so I'm going to skip over that.
Wrong screen.
Well, it did do it. I just had to be patient. Be patient for a minute. So maybe you can see the words. So Riverside, no, you had an extensive update on there, so I'm not really going to go. I think even David mentioned that we're prepping for the permitting with the regulatory agency, 100% design this fall, and then end of July, maybe into August, building that physical model. For the Greenway, I'm going to talk about these updates. So if you look at this, you can see it on this page, but so what we have, if you've looked at this past couple months, Silverline is just truing up to actual cost. Wave and Riverside, those have been the same for the past couple months after we got our 30% estimate. What is new is over on the Greenway side. So we are at the stage where we got revised estimates from HNTV for those. And while we saw approximately 40% increase on the Riverside Wave side, seemed like a 50% increase over here. And while that's a lot of money, when I look at it, it seems proportional. And these estimates were done back in 2018. So we've had a lot of escalation. I haven't dug into the numbers on that. But this is kind of what they are on. So any questions there? It's the cost of asphalt per mile. And I've dug into the numbers a little bit talking with Tim, and these numbers include all acquisition costs. And so I feel probably more comfortable that a year or two from now, we're not going to get hit with a major increase again. So I think there's some of that. So there's still some contingency there, and hopefully gas prices will go down. So therefore asphalt prices will go down. And one can hope. So now this is as of say last week, right? $13 million deficit. So there's been some announcements this week. And so Eric said I should try to shed a tear, but I can't. So when you lay in the preliminary approval for the DOT at 7.5, and then you lay in the TDA grant of approximately 5 million, you look at that and we are getting very, very close to having this paid for. That's in addition to the raise grant, which sounds very similar to what you were mentioning. So we're exploring that option. So there is some potential. And so while Eric and I talked about this, the box on the bottom, to move it up into the funding source, all those numbers have to move. And we're not going to do that until it's official, but there's a higher likelihood of, I don't know, I'm new to this, but when everyone tells me like, oh my goodness, this is exciting. So we're getting this funded. So that was kind of the thing I wanted to mention to you, that even though the estimates are going up, so are the ability to fund. And, this doesn't include individual donors. There's there's a couple pieces here where, what's the other one? Oh, it's not listed there, like, dogwood, I think there's, and so with this, who knows if we were in a position to where, now I'm not gonna say the scope line would increase, but that's good news. So any questions? on
Great
those?
Yeah, that's great.
Oh. Other aspect on the Greenway, we're at the stage where we have received a certain number of proposals from engineer architects, and so we're at the evaluation stage. So that's steadily moving forward. So that's good. Actually, I'll probably hopefully review those with the team this week, next week, and see where that goes, make a decision and move forward. So that was it on the funding side. And Coral, you already mentioned it, but I definitely want to mention this for Silverline opening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've never opened a park before, but if I could do it again, that's how you want it to end up. I mean,
Yeah, it was a great
it
evening.
was amazing. I want to say thank you for all your help, everyone who was there. I mean, my favorite sound was when you're listening to people speak and all you hear is kids playing in the background. That was great. Minus the guy walking through the wetland. It is actual. Did you guys see that?
No, I missed that.
So after the speech was done, these guys walking 2 dogs straight through that big wetland. And we're like what? I mean, it's, knee deep in it.
That's crazy.
I'm not in a hurry to get out of it either.
Yeah, listen, it took 15 minutes, so. Each his own. That, other than that, if there's any questions for me, I think we've kind of talked a lot.
Yeah,
about
and just on
everything
the timeline, so this fall, we're gonna be at 100%. Once everything's approved, then it goes to permitting. And they anticipate by the middle of next year,
else. 9 months. is
9
kind of
months in
the-
permitting, and then we have all the contractors set up, so we potentially could be breaking ground on the Greenway by next fall.
So, those dates were specifically to the park.
Okay, right,
Now, the
Riverside, yeah.
Greenway, it's earlier in the progress,
Mhm.
but there's not a lot of permitting. So the schedules are starting to overlap,
Okay,
or not overlap, they're overlap, but they're starting to align. So it could be potentially that, we're finishing this up within 6 months of each other.
okay. But it could be Riverside Park and the wave is complete before the Greenway's done.
It could be,
Okay.
and it's like a horse race.
Do you
right now.
anticipate it'll all be done within our 3-year window
Well, because.
or 1 year in?
What is it, if you have time, money?
I anticipate they'll both be at least under construction within 3 years.
I hope so. I mean, the way things are lining up, the big unknown is permitting.
Mhm.
And
Is-
cost, because, probably the costs have gone up 10% in this last hour, the way that construction.
It's insane,
materials-
right?
It's insane.
So, I mean, there's definitely some
Okay.
roadblocks, or
Uh-huh.
not roadblocks, but mountains we gotta climb, but the mountain's getting smaller and smaller,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think one of when you're talking schedule, what makes it tough is when you have that moratorium, and then really the
Oh,
hurricane.
right, the bat moratorium. I
Hurricane
forgot
season.
about that.
So I think we've able to mitigate that portion because all we have to do is clear the habitat outside of their season of flying, then all other construction can take place. So I think you can strategize with that and not let it impact your schedule that much. But when we start getting into hurricane season, we don't need to have major equipment or people in the river at that time.
Sure.
And it's people, it's coming. You can get out of the way. It's more what you don't want to have happen is being halfway through building something and then the water come and wash it all away,
Sure.
and then you get to start again.
Mhm.
So, I'm optimistic that it starts, in 23. I mean, I would
Great.
love to do that, but we'll see. I think the big unknown is the permitting stage. One thing, if I can, my plan would be while we're in permit, once it's 100% design, while we're permitting, is to try to overlap the procurement phase along with the permitting phase. So at least they may start at the same time, but at least hopefully they finish at the same time. So that way we're not permitting. Now we got to go through the whole bid process. So
And are we all buttoned up with all the pieces of land that we needed to secure for the Greenway?
thank you for bringing, that's the stage that we're going into now.
Okay.
So we're starting, Equinox is communicating with the landowners and the.
Oh, Equinox is not Woodfin.
Equinox, well, see, that's what they,
That's
that's
interesting.
new to me. So I'm still figuring that out
Mhm.
because it was county HNTB subs to Equinox for the Greenway portion. So what I don't understand is like the previous, that's what it was, the previous folks in administration were really pushing Woodfin to handle acquisition.
Mhm.
But the way it's being run now, it's going the other way, which it makes sense to go with Buncombe County, because if they're the lead agency,
Totally.
they're designing.
Uh-huh.
To me, that's their project. They should
Uh-huh.
also handle acquisition. So
Okay, right. Thank you for reminding me of that.
What about the access to the river, the other side of the river for the wave?
slowly working. on
There was
that.
a
We've-
Parcel of property over there that we needed access to, or
Yeah, personal property owned by Norfolk Southern.
So could we see some acquisition fees impact budget? Or is that not really a concern?
I don't know. I don't think so, but
Yeah, do you know if Buncombe County has changed their stance on eminent domain or? So I would find that out because it might be easier for Woodfin to do that if they don't have that policy. Because right now the county does not have a greenways planner, and so I don't know if Tim knows that that's been something that's held up greenways for a very long time, is that they would not use eminent domain, or what's it called when you say that something is uninhabitable? and-
Condemnation.
That's it, yes. And so if Woodfin doesn't have that policy, it might be easier to like get stuff for less than.
Less time, not less money.
Right.
Just less time.
well, I know Woodfin has a condemnation for some stuff because they've torn down buildings that were uninhabitable or abandoned or neglected.
And would, the commissioners may have changed since I left. I mean, I only left at around Thanksgiving. Because there are a lot new, it's almost a whole new commission that's on there since that policy was put into place, and it's a little bit more friendly to greenway construction and park construction than what the previous one was with that policy.
I'll have to take a look at that, 'cause that's way outside, that's outside of mine.
It's very boring stuff.
But that's.
It's very exciting stuff.
It's very exciting to greenways plan.
Okay, we're at the end of our agenda. Does anybody else have, and we cannot discuss anything that's not on the agenda for the fact that it's a special meeting. Does anybody have anything to say about anything that we've already talked about?
No, I'm really pleased with the 60% plan, so
Yeah.
I think they addressed our concerns and looks good.
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
Okay. We stand
Thank you.
adjourned.
We all do,
Thank you.
Hi,
all.
everybody.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Stay here and-